Good morning, everyone. Bonjour tout le monde. There's still some people logging in, but we'll get the ball rolling. 9 o'clock in the morning, a little early here for our webinars. Late for one of our presenters, so I should say good evening as well, as we have someone from that standpoint. So just as we get started, my name is André Brun, CEO at World Trade Center Winnipeg. Let's begin with our land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that we are gathered on the lands of Treaty 1 territory and that Manitoba is located on the traditional and ancestral lands of the Anishinaabe, Anishinawuk, Denisulane, Dakota Oyote nations. We acknowledge that we are also on the homelands of the Red River Métis, and northern Manitoba includes lands that were and are the ancestral lands of the Inuit. World Trade Center Winnipeg respects the treaties that were made on these territories, and acknowledges the harms and mistakes of the past and present through our nation. So as we begin, I'll just start with a couple housekeeping items as people log in, etc. And I know there will be a recording for those that perhaps get on late, etc. for everything. But just a reminder, if you have, we could ask everybody to mute. So just as you get in, especially at this beginning. So we'd ask you for your questions. If anything comes up during the presentation, feel free to throw them in the chat. We're going to take the questions at the end after the two presentations, but feel free to do that, and then I'll be tracking that. Melanie will be tracking that, and then we'll get those questions to our two presenters. If you have any logistical questions, or you're having issues hearing or anything like that, if you can use the chat to communicate with Melanie Foubert, who's handling all the logistics. If you do it with me, there's nothing I can do for you. I won't be able to help. Melanie will be the one that can help. And just a reminder, you're going to receive copies of the slides and access to the recording of this entire presentation next week. So just so everybody knows. So thank you very much. Merci beaucoup for joining us today for our webinar, Doing Business in China in 2026 and Beyond, which opportunities exist in China for Manitoba companies, which will be presented by Zhang with KPMG China, based in Shanghai, and Jeff Zhang with Canada-China Business Council. We'll also mention that today's webinar is presented in partnership with Winnipeg Chamber of Commerce. So thanks to Winnipeg Chamber of Commerce and all our partners for their support in promoting this as well. So just introducing our two speakers, and we are very lucky to have such great speakers and insight for us today. So Zhang Lavoie, a Shanghai-based market analyst, business development manager at KPMG China. He specializes in multinational companies. He's lived in China for a decade, so he brings a lot of practical, on-the-ground perspectives on how foreign companies are navigating China today, and with the focus where real commercial opportunities exist. He's born and raised in Winnipeg, Manitoba. Zhang holds a bachelor's degree in political studies from the University of Manitoba and a master's degree in international relations from Renmin University of China in Beijing. And then our other presenter is Jeff Zhang. He's Senior Regional Director at the Canada-China Business Council, brings over 25 years of international experience in private, public, nonprofit organizations in a variety of sectors, including e-commerce, oil and gas, retail, commercial real estate, education, financial services. He also led and assisted several Canadian companies and educational institutions into China, where he was responsible for strategic partnerships and branding establishment. Jeff has an MBA in marketing and international business from Concordia University in Montreal. So welcome very much to Zhang and Jeff for joining us. The floor is yours. I'll hand the microphone over to Zhang to get us started.
Merci, André. Hi, everyone. Bonjour. I'm just going to share my presentation. Okay. So it should be all good. All right. So as André has said, I am Jean-Yves Lavoie, MNC Channel Executive at KPMG China and based in Shanghai. So welcome to today's session. Actually, I was just in Winnipeg earlier this month. I gave a similar presentation in person at the World Trade Winnipeg offices, and it's a pleasure to now be able to be here to speak on doing business with China once again, but this time together with Jeff Zhang of the Canada-China Business Council. So today I will start with a brief introduction of myself and my trajectory over the last decade in China, as this will help us set the stage and provide context for what I will be discussing today. I will then discuss the findings of the MNC China Outlook report, going through the growth, revenue, and investment outlook of multinational companies operating in China, before then providing you with some of the very latest materials that we've prepared just last month about the recent rise in German FDI into China, which is a very interesting trend to follow at the moment, and about the Chinese government's recently released 15th five-year plan, which outlines the implementation of China's development goals from now until 2030. So last but not least, before we get into questions near the end, and before we get to Jeff's presentation, I will also speak on what this all means for you as Manitoban businesses and what opportunities and challenges there may be for you in particular. And so with that said, let's begin. So a little bit about myself. As Andrea said, I was born and raised in Winnipeg. More specifically, I'm from St. Boniface. I got my bachelor's degree in political studies from the University of Manitoba. So I first came to China in 2016. And the country was developing fast, right? China wasn't seeing double-digit growth like it did as late as 2010, but it had just achieved almost 7% GDP growth the previous year. And this was outstanding growth for any developing economy, let alone one that was already as advanced as China was. And so people back then were very bullish on China. They kept talking about how it would be the next superpower in a future bipolar world together with the US. So myself, I went to China because I was fascinated with geopolitics, and I wanted to witness the turning of the pages of history with my own eyes. And after my first 2 years in China, I decided to stay and pursue my postgraduate studies. So I enrolled in my master's in international relations program in Beijing in 2019. And that's when COVID hit. So just like the rest of the world, China's economic growth then grounded to a halt. When the country reemerged from pandemic lockdown at the very end of 2022, people were expecting a great economic rebound. And by this time, I had interned and then gained a full salary position as research manager at the China-Britain Business Council. And I remember we were told back then to prepare to be very busy, as business was expected to be flooding back in. And essentially, this did not happen, right? So this didn't happen for a number of reasons. Largely, it's because consumer confidence got hit pretty badly. The real estate sector and construction companies experienced a bit of a bubble burst as demand did not meet the supply, and as housing prices fell sharply, then also went people's nest eggs. And so property was no longer the reliable investment that it once was, and people found themselves having to hold on much more tightly to their savings. And so, the country's savings rate was already very high to begin with. It's thus during this period of economic slowdown and pessimism that I left the China-Britain Business Council to then work for the American Chamber of Commerce, where I worked as an events and program manager before finally joining KPMG as MNC Channel executive. So this is where I do a mixture of business development work, but also market analysis, specifically pertaining to multinational companies. So from then on, the reality is that China did experience economic recovery. It was just a gradual recovery. The problem was that pessimism had taken such a strong hold that people's perceptions weren't actually matching the reality for businesses on the ground, right? Especially in the minds of global headquarters abroad in the home countries. So many of our clients were reporting high profitability in China. And for this reason, given this discrepancy, to gain a better understanding of the real situation on the ground for MNCs operating in China, we conducted a survey. So our survey was conducted over the summer of 2025. We surveyed 137 high-level executives, including CEOs, CFOs, and country managers across a wide range of sectors, from automotive, consumer and retail, life sciences, healthcare, finance, industrial manufacturing, chemicals, energy, and more. Though our respondents represented companies across Europe, North America, and Asia Pacific, I do have to admit that virtually the entirety of our Asia Pacific representation was from Japanese companies. So just keep this in mind as I go through the presentation. This also yielded interesting responses, but we'll get to that in a bit. So how were the results? To spare you the suspense, the responses were mixed. So let's move on to that. So on our survey, we asked respondents several questions about confidence and growth in 2025 when the survey was taken, but also confidence and growth in the next 3 to 5 years, right? But this is growth in three ways: growth of China's economy, growth of the global economy, and growth of their own company's China operations. And you can see here that confidence for all three is decidedly mixed. But the interesting part is actually in the details. So MNCs have more demonstrable confidence in China's economy, for example, than in the global economy, which is interesting. And with the most staggering optimism being for China's economic growth in the next 3 to 5 years. Even more significant is that 67% are at least moderately confident of their own operations' growth in the next 3 to 5 years. And so while MNCs felt very mixed about the economy in 2025, there is cautious optimism for the near future. So what was the reason for this optimism? We wondered if it had anything to do with maybe witnessing early signs of economic recovery following government stimulus that was announced in 2024 and then in early 2025. But we found that only 39% of respondents felt the effects of the stimulus. And so for those who were pessimistic about growth, the top three reasons given were first, competition from local companies, right? It's a highly competitive market. Two, economic uncertainty. And three, geopolitical tensions. Moving on to the next slide now, we also asked MNCs about their revenue forecast. And this was also decidedly mixed, right? So only 52% of MNCs were forecasting growth in revenues in 2025, and as many as 25% were even forecasting negative growth. Additionally, we had, on one hand, 33% of MNCs expecting an increase in the share of their global revenue to be coming from China. Then on the other hand, we had 20% expecting a decrease. Still, 42% expected no changes at all. So among those that were more confident about the revenue growth, there were three primary reasons. Either one, they had optimized their operational efficiency, which often can actually just mean that they cut their workforce. Two, they were launching new products or new revenue streams and were feeling confident about this. Or three, they had initiated localization. Now, localization is a bit of a nebulous term, and it can mean a lot of things, and we're going to dive into that a little bit deeper later on. But for now, I will reveal the regional differences in our survey responses. So our findings were surprising, right? So North American companies, but these were mostly American companies, were generally more confident than all of the others in China's economic growth in 2025. However, European companies were the ones with the greatest confidence in China's economic growth for the next 3 to 5 years. Additionally, and this is despite China-US geopolitical trade tensions, North American MNCs were the most optimistic about the growth in their own China operations in both the short and the medium term. Now, Japanese companies were the least confident in all measures, and this is actually because from our point of view, it's because many of the Japanese companies operating in China are legacy industrial and automotive companies, which are experiencing significant competition and pressure on margins. And so, and not to mention even the current trade tensions. So moving on, it's for the very same reason that when looking at the responses by sector, it is automotive MNCs that report some of the greatest lack of confidence. So when asked about China's economic growth prospects in 2025, consumer and retail MNCs reported the least confidence, but this is also unsurprising given the low consumer confidence as of late. However, there is significant belief that consumer confidence will rebound, right? And this was reflected in our findings when asked about their confidence in China's economic growth in 3 to 5 years. So life sciences and healthcare MNCs are, unsurprisingly, the most optimistic. And this is because their future is, how to put this, more or less secured given the rapidly aging population and consequently the accelerated rise of the silver economy. So if life sciences and healthcare MNCs were only moderately confident about the future rather than fully confident, we would say that would actually be due to maybe regulatory uncertainty in being able to secure patents, or simply competition with local players. Right, so it's still, again, very mixed responses. Moving on now to investment outlook. So a large portion of our survey was dedicated to investment outlook. And this was because media was reporting record low numbers of FDI into China. Whereas one of our most prominent deal advisory partners at the firm, he was actually witnessing over the course of the year a significant increase in MNC mergers and acquisitions in China. And this was more akin to pre-COVID levels. So what are the numbers? Well, we found that most MNCs, 75% actually, were maintaining or increasing their investments in China in 2025. And though we were hearing a lot about MNCs exiting the China market and moving their operations and investments elsewhere, say to India or to Vietnam, the reality is that 94% of our MNC respondents are planning to continue to invest in the China market. Only 1% were making preparations to exit China. So while this is in some ways revelatory, I admit that we are missing in our data how much these MNCs are putting, how many eggs they're putting in other markets, as in they could be diversifying to lessen their China exposure, etc. So this is something that we will be looking into for the 2026 edition of the MNC Outlook Survey, which we will actually be launching next month. So what type of investments are MNCs making? Well, they're primarily greenfield investments, mergers or acquisitions, and joint ventures. And they are doing this because, faced with intense local competition in a challenging market, they are vertically integrating by acquiring their distributors, agents, and OEMs to better understand and serve the consumers here in China. So for this part, this slide here, I am going to step away from the survey for a little bit to talk about this recent phenomenon, and that is the rise in German FDI into China. And it may be relevant because it's interesting. So the figures on the right there, they tell the story. So in 2025, there was a 55% year-on-year increase in German FDI into China, whereas there was a 46% decrease year-on-year in German FDI into the United States. Now, investments are still higher in the US, as you can see, by a few $billion, but this shift is significant and indicative of changing attitudes. So China is being seen as an increasingly more stable and reliable market and partner, whereas the United States is being seen increasingly in the opposite light, right? So I'm sure as Canadians, this is unsurprising. Other than this geopolitical hedging, what are reasons for this rise in FDI into China? Well, one reason is due to firms wanting to produce more and more locally to serve Chinese demand, while avoiding tariffs and geopolitical risks, or this is otherwise known as the China for China strategy. Then the other reason is due to growing view of China as an important innovation hub and export base. And so this is part of what's called the In China for Global strategy. Moving on here, the next slide shows more that German auto sector is heavily exposed to the China market. So in 2024, automotive sector FDI made up 73% of total German FDI. So we can imagine that the FDI in 2025 was probably about the same. Now, this represented a significant increase from the 56% share that it had back in 2023. And so, though we've previously seen that automotive MNCs are fairly pessimistic in their growth forecast, one major player actually has seen big returns on their investments, Volkswagen. So Volkswagen had previously struggled to keep up with competitors in the China market, but it managed to regain top market share in China in the first 2 months of 2026. And this is thanks to its joint ventures with local companies. And so it's finding itself in the first place ahead of Geely, Toyota, and then BYD in this order. In the interest of time, actually, I'm going to mostly skip the next couple of slides. They mostly talk about the risks of increased exposure, which include increased competitive pressure and the risk of creating too much of a dependency by putting too many eggs in one basket. But overall, the consensus is that it's better to be in the China market than not. And so there's so much that MNCs can learn, but also just China is just such an important economy these days, right? Next slide. Also, these slides, by the way, since we will be providing them to you afterwards, you will have them, so no worries. This slide here, just to go a bit briefly back on the survey. This slide is on growth and profitability of MNCs in China. So when asked if MNCs have made a shift from focusing more on profitability than on growth, we found that 61% of MNCs had done so, and had primarily done so by optimizing operational efficiency, by focusing on pricing strategies to increase margins, and by shifting resources towards higher margin products or services. Another interesting figure here is that 45% of MNCs had downsized their workforce from 2024 to 2025. This is due to a number of reasons, from having to improve efficiency, or it was due to economic downturn. But this is something interesting that we'll want to look at again for the next survey. On this slide here, so I'll mention localization again. So MNC's localization strategies finally come in here. Localization can mean all sorts of things, right? It can be adjusting your products and services to be specifically tailored to your target market. It can be localizing your supply chains to be closer to your consumers or suppliers. It could also mean increasing the portion of local staff and management in order to have your company be run and managed by people who understand the market best, right? So as for the results, we found that 83% of MNCs have localized at least some aspects of their China operations, whereas only 11% did not localize at all, right? So key business functions that we asked, key ones that have been localized are supply chains and logistics, R&D, but also mostly manufacturing. Another interesting too is we asked survey respondents about how many times their global CEO visited China in 2026, and we thought maybe there was a correlation, right, between the number of times that the CEO has visited and the confidence in the operations in or in China's economic growth. Essentially, actually, we found a small correlation, but not very significant. Moving on now, I won't spend too much time on this slide, but this will be included in the slides that you will receive later. So it's about China's latest 5-year plan. Essentially, as I've mentioned before, these plans are China's guide for implementation of its development goals over the next 5 years. And what is important to mention for multinational companies in particular is that the Chinese government has explicitly raised the low consumption rate and also excessively high competition as issues that they are looking to address. So to help increase consumption, for example, the government plans to reduce consumers' precautionary savings. And they'll do so by improving the social safety net, but also by raising household income. As for involution, which is what we use to describe the relatively high prevalence of competition, overcapacity, price wars, and excessive discounting, the government plans to curb these issues by tightening approvals in the tech sector, by being more selective in what gets subsidized, but also by pushing for consolidation in overly saturated sectors. Just going to finish up with my last few slides. On this slide here, by the way, don't worry about downloading the QR code. We would be happy to provide you with a report at the end. This last slide here, I wanted to mention considerations for Manitoban businesses. So firstly, a clear opportunity for Manitoba lies in its strength, right? Its agri-food sector. Grains and cooking oil in particular are in high demand, and both of which are strong Manitoban exports. A second opportunity that I've recently come across is in investments into value-added processing of Manitoban agricultural commodities within Manitoba itself. So there is a strong trend in recent years of Chinese companies going abroad, investing abroad. And with increased risks of trade barriers and supply chain disruptions, many companies are looking to guard against these risks by investing closer to their target markets. So I can see Manitoba positioning itself quite rightly as the agriculture-rich landing point for a long-term North American operations, something that may prove very attractive for Chinese investors in the context of tariffs and the push for supply chain diversification. Unfortunately, there are certain uncertainties for Manitoba businesses, and specifically I'll mention here with regards to Manitoba pork. So though Mark Carney's trip to Beijing this year has led to a bit of a detente and has helped significantly reduce tariffs and trade restrictions, high tariffs remain on Canadian pork imports. So we are unsure of when or if these tariffs will be lowered, but we are keeping an eye on news. Currently, China's foreign minister is supposed to arrive in Ottawa today, actually, and I believe tariffs will be a point of discussion. So with that said, that will be all from me. In conclusion, China is a challenging and complex market, but it's still one that can be immensely rewarding for those that invest the time and the effort needed to understand and find your niche. So there's a lot of negative perceptions about China's economy and the situation for MNCs here on the ground. They don't always quite match reality, as even though some sectors are experiencing difficulties right now, others are thriving. I had chosen to be here in China because it is such a forward-thinking, fast, and dynamic place. And I can say from my own experience that it remains so today and most likely still will be in the future, thanks to the country's significant investments in new industries, in AI, in green tech, in smart manufacturing, among others. And so with that said, thank you all for joining today's session. I hope you found it informative, and please feel free to reach out to me for anything related to doing business in China. Thank you.
Hi, thank you, Zhang. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jeff Zhang. I'm the Regional Director, Central Canada at Canada-China Business Council, or CCBC. As you may know, the first Canadian senior business delegation visited China in 1978, led by the federal government. Later on in the same year, CCBC was established in Toronto by a group of multinational Canadian companies. In 1979, a year later, a dominant Chinese company in international trade and investment named CITIC joined CCBC. So this makes CCBC a truly bilateral organization. So this is CCBC's current board leadership and the executive committee. So Olivier Desmarais, Vice President of Power Corporation, is our chair. Graham Shantz is our president. Graham used to work at the GAC, responsible for Asia Pacific region. And our vice chairs include Honorable Scott Bryson and Martin Gauchon, who used to be the federal ministers. So this is where our board directors come from. As you can see, they are from the top Canadian companies in various sectors. There is one commonality shared by all of them, that is, their companies are doing business with China, be it investment, trade, or services. Our board directors not only providing support to CCBC daily operations, but they also giving advice to CCBC members when it's needed. CCBC is a non-governmental, non-profit, membership-based organization. Currently, we have over 320 organizational members across sectors in both countries. Most of our members are for-profit companies. The rest are government agencies, such as the City of Toronto, Invest Windsor Access, Invest Durham Region, etc. Around members, 80% are Canadian members, 20% are Chinese companies. This year, we can see that more Chinese companies joining CCBC. Many of them are investing in Canada or trading with Canada. As for member service, we have 3 offices in Canada, Toronto, Vancouver, and Montreal. 2 offices in China, Beijing, and Shanghai. So each office, hosts informative and educational events on a regular basis, and we help members connect with potential clients and business partners. In addition, we publish reports, surveys, and insights so that our members can learn from these resources to do more and better business between Canada and China. As Zhang mentioned earlier, this year, Prime Minister Carney visited China in January, turned a new page to Canada-China bilateral relations, as well as bilateral business relations. During Carney's visit, CCBC organized a major business banquet in his honor in Beijing. In his speech, Prime Minister Carney thanked CCBC's leadership and CCBC members for being resilient and focused in the past few years when the bilateral relations were challenging. Prime Minister Carney said, when channels between governments were narrowed, it's often the business leaders, education leaders who continued to build new possibilities and partnership. And that brought us to today's achievement. In April, Canadian Finance Minister François-Philippe Champagne visited Beijing, and Canadian International Trade Minister Maninda Sidhu attended China International Consumer Products Expo in Haikou. And today, the Chinese Foreign Minister, Mr. Wang Yi, starts visiting Canada. So it's the first such visit in 10 years, offers another positive sign about the Canada-China relationship. Well, in order to have a general picture of the state of the Canada-China bilateral businesses, CCBC conducts Canada-China Business Survey every 2 years. So the latest Canada-China Business Survey covers the year of 2025 and the first 3 months of this year. Here are 5 key takeaways. We found 82% of Canadian companies see Carney government's approach to China has positive impact on their businesses. 86% of companies see China as a priority in their global expansion. 68% of companies plan to expand their business in China. Though the bilateral relations between Canada and China were challenged in the past few years, and the image of Canada in China was affected, 72% of Canadian companies still find the branding of Canada in China is a business asset. And 51% of companies are optimistic of the future of their business in China. From this graph, you can see the change of China's role in Canadian companies' global strategies. We find Canadian companies increasingly position China as a top global priority, from approximately 15% in 2023 increased to 35% in 2025. Well, doing business is never easy, so doing international business is even harder, and China is not an exception. So among the top 6 obstacles in doing business in or with China, the number 1 is bilateral relationship between US and China. Number 2 is a bilateral relationship between Canada and China, and number 4 is geopolitical risk. In other words, among the top 6 obstacles, 3 are geopolitically related, not business ones. The Chinese market is becoming more competitive because China is much more advanced in new technologies. Canadian visa processing for the Chinese visitors to Canada has been a problem, actually, for many years. That slowed down or even killed potential business opportunities. So we also surveyed Chinese companies invested and operating in Canada and found their claims of obstacles in doing business in or with Canada. Again, political risk is number 1. Though slightly different, politicization is the number 1. Other obstacles include foreign investment restriction, flight costs, less direct flights between major cities in Canada and China, labor regulations, and the Canadian government's policies. So if Manitoba wants to attract Chinese investments, these are the obstacles to think about and overcome. The good thing is that Canada remains a top country for Chinese companies to invest and trade with. So Zhang just now, he touched a little bit about China's 15th five-year plan. So I'm going to go a little bit deeper here. So in March, China's 15th five-year plan was officially approved by the National People's Congress, providing enormous trade opportunities between Canada and China in agriculture, energy, high-tech, and consumer sectors. The quality and safety of Canadian agriculture products are highly recognized in China. As you know, China has been a big buyer of Canadian canola seeds, peas, soybeans, beef, and pork. And Manitoba is a big producer of these agriculture products. So there are tremendous opportunities for Manitoba to export agriculture products to China. In green energy sector, Manitoba has expertise in hydroelectricity generation, and China is the world's leader in wind and solar electricity generation. As you know, electricity is the foundation of AI development. So there are lots of cooperation opportunities between Manitoba and China in the energy sector as well. Everyone knows that China has a huge population. Its middle-class consumers are close to the total population of the USA. And the population is also aging fast. So in China, the so-called silver hair economy is a hot topic due to its huge business opportunities. Manitoba's health food, health supplements, elder care products associated with the branding of Canada will have a big potential there. In manufacturing and automotive sectors, as Zhang mentioned earlier, China is the ideal country to cooperate with. As you know, China has been a factory of the world for decades, and now it is also an innovator and a leader in many advanced manufacturing areas, and a leader in electric vehicles. Manitoba is a leader in Canada in food processing and heavy vehicle and advanced manufacturing. Again, there are many opportunities and areas here to collaborate. Well, this is a slide I borrowed from the Chinese Consul General in Toronto when he presented the business opportunities for Canada at CCBC event in Toronto early this month. As you can see, it listed energy, agriculture, consumer, financial sectors, emerging and future industries, trade and investment as opportunities for Canadian businesses in China's 15th five-year plan, which starts this year to 2030. Well, nothing can be achieved without action. So we are here to help you to explore the Chinese market and to catch the business opportunities in China. As the Senior Regional Director of CCBC, I'm responsible for Ontario and Manitoba. So you're welcome to contact me to have further discussions. My email address is here for you to reach out to me. Thanks to Auntie, to World Trade Center Winnipeg to have me and talk to you all for watching. And thank you all for watching. Thank you. So
yeah, thank you very much for your presentations. Very insightful, very interesting. A reminder to all those attending, the slide deck and recording will be provided within a week. And also now is the opportunity, if you have questions for our two speakers, feel free to throw them in the chat. I'll be monitoring that and seeing. And maybe I'll just get the ball rolling. And I think one thing, and both of you alluded to it, the fact that our Prime Minister, Canada, has visited China, but also very recently President Trump from the US. And I think one of you in one of the surveys talked about that relationship having the biggest impact on Canada. I'm just wondering if those visits do have the potential to change? Is there anything that has sort of evolved from that maybe Manitoba should be watching more closely going forward, that will impact like the surveys that you did a year ago, that maybe you're interested in seeing what the reaction is to those to those visits and the impact it could have on business. I don't know who wants to go first, but I open it up to both of you. Go ahead, Jeff.
No, I think Jean-Yves, you can go
Okay. Okay, Jean-Yves, you've been handed the microphone.
No worries. Now, what I was thinking is that Trump's latest visit, and I attended an event on this at the European Chamber just today. So the European Chamber based in Shanghai, and let's just gonna say it was a bit puzzling for a lot of people. It appears to be that Trump's goal was a bit of a shock and awe approach, where he's bringing all these important business people a bit last minute actually, because Jensen Huang of NVIDIA came in a bit last minute, and so maybe he was hoping to catch China by surprise, but ultimately that didn't seem to really lead to much other than maybe a stabilization of where things are at right now. There is a bit of a relaxation. It's not getting worse. What is, let's say, positive for the US is that they've gotten commitment from Chinese President Xi Jinping to come to the United States for an official visit in September. Right, so this already, it kind of makes it important for both sides to come up with agreements by then, which is positive. And you know what? As it relates to Canada, let's say if there's a relaxation of China-US relations, it's good for us too. We do not want to be caught in the crossfire, and as we have been in the past. So let's say a détente in relationship between the both, I welcome it.
Jeff, anything to add?
Okay, so what I can say is that the business people in Canada and the business people in China as well, they are really, really concerning of the uncertainties in the world right now, and also the complexity of diplomacy, multinational diplomacy. So they want to see a more predictable, in business environment. For Chinese investors in Canada, of course, to see, as Zhang mentioned, they don't want to see that Canada is going to sacrifice, Chinese companies' benefits in Canada due to, the Canada-US relationships. So that's their concerns. And of course, for Canadian companies doing business with China, they don't want to see the bilateral relations between the two countries would be damaged again in the near future. So to make their business even harder, in China. So I think it's very complex. I can't say, which direction we are going to go to, whether positive or negative. We will see. We will see.
No, and understood. And I think I'm putting you on the spot. I think very difficult in these in the current climate to predict, but just to get your senses. One thing that came to mind as well is there was the surveys that both of you did. I'm wondering if, and this is maybe more for Jean-Yves, but given your experience in the China market, is what's China's perspective on Canada? And like we said, we think the Prime Minister has been very aggressive, let's say, on the sort of market diversification piece. He's out of the country regularly, and that has included visit all over the world. Where does Canada stand? So where is that? We talked about the confidence in the China market. Where is China on their confidence in Canada as a trade partner in Canadian business, etc.? There was some talk about the brand. I think, Jeff, you alluded to that too. But anything to add there as far as where is Canada fit in China's plans?
What I'll say is, and it's no surprise that our relations with China weren't great since specifically 2018, with the situation with Huawei CFO. What I can say right now is that though things have, let's say, marginally improved, things are better now. Let's say actually there's cynicism, maybe just. People believe that, and rightly so, that it's very logical that there's belief that Canada basically is only doing this because of the Trump administration. And so as soon as, let's say, there's a new administration in the US, there's belief that, China may very well simply just pivot back to the US. And so ending this brief moment of detente. So that's kind of, I think, where people are at right now. It remains to be seen whether they would trust Canada to pull through on some of these agreements. But no, it's for us to see.
That's an interesting point, and I'll jump in, Zhang. It's interesting. We had the new consul general from India in Manitoba, I think 2 weeks ago now. Sort of the same message, basically saying how dedicated are you to market diversification, or if things change to the US, will Canada just fall back to its old ways? So it's
Right.
interesting to say I think they're pleased with the rhetoric, but they want to see the action and a commitment long term, not something that's just until things are better, until there's a new Kuzma, etc. Jeff, did you have
That's
anything
right.
to add on that piece and what you're hearing?
Yes, I think the Chinese business communities and even the education sector in China, they really hope that Canada would be opener, or to be stable in trading with China. For instance, the for education sector, actually Canada used to be a top country for Chinese overseas students. But now it dropped a lot. I think according to some education agencies' research, they think that Canada even dropped out of the top 10 destination countries for overseas studies. So that is very sad, because for Canada, the international students, when they are here, they are not only paying higher tuition, like more fundings for Canadian universities, colleges, and even high schools. But also, if they stay here, they already have the language ability. They have the Canadian education. They already merged with Canadian communities. So it's a very good pool or potentials for them to stay in Canada, make contributions to the economic development. Secondly, for the business communities as well, as I said earlier, many Chinese companies, when they are thinking about investing in Canada, they actually have a very, very strong interest to invest in Canada. However, when they are thinking about the geopolitical risk, particularly if they could be sacrificed because Canada wants to have more deals with the US, and if they have been, the sacrifice, I think that's the only risk that they are concerning a lot. Because for business risks, they can manage, they can handle, they can do the objective feasibility studies to figure out whether they could do business here in Canada. However, for geopolitical risks, as until you agreed, it's so hard to predict.
If I can add really quickly, actually, before we move on to the next question. Yeah, I can think of a specific example. I had a conversation with someone who was looking into importing Canadian beef, for example. And the reality is that ended up being very, very difficult to do so, and even basically he couldn't do it because Canadian beef exporters simply found it easier to continue selling to the market down south. And so it's just the reality of the situation, and people are very aware of that fact.
No. A good insight, and appreciate that. Again, a reminder, if anybody wants to throw some questions in the chat, I have many questions. I could go on for a while with Zhang and Jeff, but I do want to give you the opportunity to any specific questions, and it could be to your sector, to your specific situation as a business. We have talked a lot about the multinationals piece. I'm wondering for SMBs in Manitoba, in whatever sector, I think China is viewed very much as probably, and perhaps a perception, very much an import play for Canadian SMEs as far as inputs, as far as those type of things. I'm wondering if that's true, or are there any specific export opportunities for SMEs in China, or should it be more viewed from that standpoint? I'm talking about smaller companies that maybe have a niche product or a niche service. Are there opportunities for those SMEs, maybe in specific sectors that you see, ag tech, clean tech, those type of things come to mind just based on your presentations?
Jeff, if you have anything.
Yeah. So when I talked about CCBC, I said CCBC was established by multinational Canadian companies, but actually, among CCBC membership, I think 70% of CCBC members are small and medium-sized companies, enterprise, because that's a reflection of the Canadian economy. So for small and medium-sized enterprises, I think many of them are in the consumer products industry. So we do have many members exporting, for instance, skincare products, ginseng products, wine, Canadian ice wine to China, and health supplements. So I think they are doing very well. So usually they started with a cross-border e-commerce channel. Once they have established their brands in China, they also enter into the physical retail channels as well.
Yeah, just to add on that, I have less exposure now in my current role with SMEs. But what I can say is back when this is when I used to work at the Chamber of Commerce, the American Chamber of Commerce, I had a lot more visibility there since many members were SMEs. And as Jeff said, when I go to trade shows, whether it be the CIIE, which is the Imports Expo, there are many Canadian SME companies there, and like Jeff said, there's good representation of ice wine.
Yeah,
Excellent.
So I can add to something to CIE, China International Import Expo. So for your information, we are going to organize a Canadian missions to China to attend CIE in November. So which starts on November the 5th to November the 10th.
That's excellent information, Jeff, and please share it with us as well, and we'll be happy to share it with our companies and companies in Manitoba as well. We're coming towards the end. I do want to get one question based on, I think it was Zhang that brought it up that I found interesting, that and it's not export or import, it's that investment opportunity you talked about as far as the potential of Chinese companies investing in value add in the ag space and the idea of getting access to North America. So where's there seems to be an opportunity there for Manitoba, but maybe as a fellow Manitoban, how can Manitoba get on the radar? It seems to be we're working on those type of things, but any suggestions to us? I see a couple people on the call from the province, so maybe an opportunity to tell them how does Manitoba take advantage of that opportunity?
Well, see, this is based off of a actually fairly recent conversation I've had. I'm told that in Manitoba there is not a lot of value-added processing being done, and so if you need to, if you want to get into that space, reach out to us. We would love to help you out in this. A bit of a shameless advertisement here on our point, but I have to do so, right? So no, please do reach out to us. We would be happy to try to help you reach out to either organizations or we'll see what we can do.
Excellent. That's very good. Anything from your side, Jeff? And maybe as we conclude, I'll give you both the chance if there's any sort of a concluding remark or something that maybe a question that I did not ask you, additional information that you have to throw. Great on that Canadian delegation going to CIE. That's really good to know, and we would ask you to share that with us. But Jeff, I'll put the mic to you to maybe some concluding remarks, and then Zhang, one last chance too.
Okay, sure. So first of all, about the investment, China's investment to Canada or to Manitoba, as I said earlier, because we have done the research, we have the survey, we have known the obstacles for the Chinese companies to invest in Canada or in Manitoba. So if you are attracting those Chinese direct investments into the province, those obstacles you have to think about and to negotiate with them, to talk to them and see how to overcome those major obstacles. Secondly, for trade, as I said in my presentation, there's a lot of opportunities for Manitoba, the agriculture products to export to China, and also the health supplements, some elder care services. Those are the products or services that the Chinese consumers are looking for. Thank you.
Thank you.
So,
Jean-Yves?
Jeff has summarized it really well, so I'll keep mine short and sweet. What I'm going to say for closing remarks is please reach out at any point. We will be working on the next edition of the MNC China Outlook report, and so please keep your eyes and ears out for that. Please do be sure that I will be advertising that myself as well. So maybe stay tuned for a future World Trade Center Winnipeg presentation by myself on the next survey.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. Thanks, Jean-Yves and Jeff, for being part of this, for your insight. Very, very appreciated. Thanks to everybody who joined us online. Reminder, you'll be getting copies of the slides and access to the video. Check the feed for other events that are coming, including our next WTC talks on June 17th with Paul Soubry from New Flyer Industries. So thank you very much, everybody. Have a good evening, Jean-Yves. Sorry for keeping you up late, hopefully not past your bedtime, but I really appreciate everybody joining us. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup.